Hi everybody and welcome to Learn Live Streaming Live. My name's John Lacey. Today on the show we're going to be talking all about creating live stream assets for your live shows. We're going to talk about backgrounds and banners and overlays and video clips and whatever else comes up during the conversation, but we are going out live to all the various places. So if you are watching live, let us know in the chat. That's always appreciated. So I guess today, I wanted to start by saying you don't necessarily need all of this stuff to have a live stream or a live session. Really, all you do need is a microphone, a camera, reliable internet connection, and some sort of device, whether that's a phone or a tablet or a computer. That's all you really need to get started. But I think it can be quite useful to also have some of these other assets lined up. In part because I think they make your show seem a little bit more professional, but also they can really give you some breathing space. So especially if you're like me and you do this show completely by yourself, the ability to have something that you can throw to is really, really helpful. And in part, the reason I wanted to cover this week is because in my new shows, I haven't really set this up yet. So I really want to take some time to think about this and work it into my two shows, which is this one and also OBS Obsessed. But I think it's really worthwhile thinking about, and you don't necessarily need to do this yourself. If you don't have the time or the energy or the interest to learn the tools to create these assets, you can certainly employ other people to do that. You can hire graphic designers and video editors to do things for you as well. But I thought it would be worthwhile if we look at some of the things that we can do and conceptually how you might use them. So first of all, everyone uses different software and different devices, and that's cool. Like, work with whatever you want to work with. You don't need to justify your choices. I know a lot of people use Canva for graphics and video. I'm very much in the Affinity Suite these days. I did get the Affinity Suite on, I want to say, Black Friday last year. It's a bit of a blur, but I think that was the context of all of this back then. So I guess let's actually head over to Affinity Designer and let's talk about a few things. So first of all, when it comes to actually creating assets, I guess we need to think about the canvases that we have available to us. And this might vary actually if you're doing a vertical stream or if you're doing a horizontal stream. So in this case, I've got my new file options available in Affinity Designer, and I really want to find sort of a 1920 by 1080 arrangement here. And I don't know that I've got one handy, possibly. But if all else fails, I can certainly just put in these values myself. So I'll go 1920 by 1080. We can talk about our colors. So again, RGB's perfect for screens. So I'm going to click Create. And while I'm doing that, just a big hello to Americo, who's joining us from Toronto, Canada. Thank you for being here. So now I've kind of got a blank canvas, and blank canvases are wonderful places to be creative, but they can also be a little bit scary. So, the great thing about a lot of the graphic software is that you can just iterate. You can try different things out, and you can think about how you want to work and the different things that you might want to try. So the great thing about, and I think this is probably true of most graphic software today, is that you can have a number of different slides or artboards. So you'll see here, I've got my first artboard here. I can design whatever I want here, but I can also just go in and create a few extra as well. So I can add layers. I guess probably what I would do is just go to the artboard tool. And especially in things like Photoshop and Affinity Designer and Illustrator, is the artboards don't necessarily need to all be the same size. So I can actually go to my artboard and say, hey, I want something that's maybe, I don't know, 1080 pixels wide. But I kind of want something that's, actually that was the position, not the width. So 1920 was bright, and I will go maybe 400. And I'm going to adjust. I don't remember what this value is, but we can figure it out. Maybe. And hello to Livestream consultants. Thank you for being here. It's afternoon where you are. It's actually Saturday morning here in Australia. And I must admit, I probably could have used a few extra hours of sleep this morning. So we'll figure it out. It'll be fine. But essentially, the great thing about this is not only can we sort of design different assets of different sizes, potentially all in the same document, and sort of reuse the assets and move things around. You know, you've got the opportunity to play. So often it'll be something like, you know, I want to try out a few different options. Maybe if you're designing for somebody else, you want to see how they look in the software. You want to get opinion from different stakeholders. You can certainly do that. But we can sort of go from there. So I guess I'm a little obsessed with the idea of art boards, but I guess the other thing, and I appreciate this is slightly behind my head a little bit. So, but we also have the ability to name these things. And again, if you know me at all, you know, I'm a bit of a stickler for naming things. So, you know, let's call this one backgrounds, and I'll call this one banner. And we've got a whole bunch of different things that we could try out. So again, it's probably even worthwhile just to have another art board. And again, I might just go 1920 by 1080. And this might be a great place to, you know, start thinking about some sort of mood board. So if there are particular fonts, particular colors, particular treatments of graphics that you like to use, it's probably a really good place to start with that sort of stuff. And hello to Erica. Thank you so much for being here. Hope you're having a great week. All right, so this is kind of the building blocks. And again, like I said earlier, I'm using Affinity Designer 2. You can use whatever you like. You don't need to justify your software choices to me at all. I appreciate that. But I just kind of wanted to talk through some of the things that might be worthwhile exploring. So I'm actually going to... In fact, what will I do? Let's actually... I'm going to see if I can just open a recent document. In fact, if we go open recent, and I'll go more... This will sort of give me the ability to look at some of the things that some of the other documents I've had. So let's actually look at OBS Obsessed. So this was kind of, this is for the other show, but I think it's worthwhile sort of exploring because there are a couple of different things in here that are worth calling out. And again, this is kind of just a template, and it was really just thinking about the different layers and how these things combined, because depending on your streaming software, and it will vary a little bit, you know, you may have the ability to just have a background and an overlay and that's it. Or if you're using something like OBS Studio or Ecamm Live, there's a really good chance that you can actually work in different layers. So it could be that you can have some of these elements in front of you, some of them behind you. Again, if you're working with a blue or green screen, or you've removed the background by some other means, then you can see more of that background. If you've just got a solid background, which is totally cool, you might need to think about, you know, is it more of a border or, you know, something that's outside of the frame of the camera. But the great thing about this is that we can sort of work in layers, both in the software, but potentially also in your streaming software. So you can do that there. I might even just open up something else. And I guess this is a little outside of the scope of today's show, but obviously the one place you probably are designing a lot of graphics is video thumbnails. And I kind of wanted to bring that up ever so slightly, because again, the great thing about having these different artboards is that I can keep all the related elements together. So in here, I've got a couple of square objects for the Learn Live Streaming Live sort of quote-unquote podcast artwork, which at the moment is only available sort of on the YouTube side of podcasting. But I do aspire to actually set this up as a real podcast. I just haven't had time yet. And then I've got another variation for the LinkedIn newsletter. And then I've sort of got all these placeholders for different treatments for video thumbnails. And I've also got sort of some unrelated ones on the side here. And it's really funny. If I look if I look down here, I did this video on the wireless micro, which you may or may not have seen, but I I couldn't decide what to do with it. So I made so many thumbnails. I went to Sam Proof, who was my co-host for the video and live streaming show. He had his own recommendations. So I've created a lot of variations. And again, in YouTube for a video on demand, you can nominate 3 and let it do its test. And I think this one here was kind of the option that YouTube decided was most appropriate. But you've got all kinds of options to play, to duplicate these things, to change elements, and I think really importantly, not lose the work you've already done, because I think that's where this can fall over, is if you just make 100 changes and then you go, I really liked how it looked 75 changes ago, and maybe your undo capability can take you back there, but it's probably unlikely. So, you know, it's a really good opportunity to sort of duplicate these things. And I should say too, like in Affinity Designer, I think it's probably just a matter of right-clicking and going duplicate. And then I've got another variation, and I'll call it as much. And again, I probably just want to move this somewhere else. So I might even just add a 2 onto that. I'm not really sure whether... Okay, it's all the way over here, which is probably a little bit far to go, but essentially we've got another version of that, and I can probably just grab the art tool, the artboard tool, and rearrange that as well. In fact, let's just... I do kind of like working in numbers. I don't know, that's a weird quirk about me, is I really love pixel values. So I can do stuff like that, but anyway, that's fine. We could figure that out, but I'm not going to dwell on that too much. I just wanted to let you know. And again, this will work a little bit differently in whatever graphics software you're using, but the idea I think is really powerful and really important to keep in mind. And hello to Saeed, who's joining us from Germany today. So I guess if we take a bit of a step back, the idea with today's show, and again, I'm probably guided a little bit by the comments, is thinking about the kinds of things that we might want to design to incorporate into our live stream shows. And that could be a background, that could be an overlay, that could be an overlay with transparency. We'll talk about that in a second. That could be video, it could be animation, it could be all of the things. And again, how you actually produce these elements is really very much up to you and the software that you use and your preferences. Or it could even be a case of, I don't know how to do some of these things, I'm just going to hire somebody else to do them for me. And Business Growth Ready says you can also bulk export artboards. Yes, absolutely. And like you can, it's a little abstract, but you can actually create artboards within artboards. So if you wanted to export a particular segment, but you can also sort of toggle on the, in fact, let's talk about that. That's probably worthwhile actually demonstrating. Let me go back to the screen share. So the other thing about this is, like, if we go back to this OBS one, and there are a few different things here happening, but essentially if we look over here, and again, I appreciate I'm probably blocking that a little bit. Let's see if we can move it out and resize that dialog box a little bit. So we've got the artboards, and again, this works pretty similarly in other software as well. So, you know, whatever you're using should be fine. But we've got the artboard here itself, and within here we've got our elements. So it could be that maybe I wanted to export a version of this image without this rectangle. I just locked that, but I probably want to adjust this one for the visibility. So I can turn that off and I can export it, and I'll have a version without, and then I might have that there as well. And I could, and I think the thing I actually did for this particular show, is that I kind of, like, I did export this rectangle as its own element and the background, and it was sort of a number of different layers. And I really just did that by sort of toggling the visibility, exporting, and toggling it back on. It's really interesting. If I accidentally hit tab, I sort of get this different view, which is interesting. And I should say, like, I really like the Affinity products, but I haven't been using them that long. So, you know, anything can happen. Hello, Roy. Thanks for joining us. And Seed notes too that he does similar things for Figma. Absolutely. And Roy is saying, be sure to hit that like button, which is always fun. In fact, I'm going to press this like button. Like and subscribe. And that's sort of an example of an asset that you might want to build. And I've kind of, we'll talk about that in a second as well. But I have done entire shows on showing you how I built that one. And I should say too, sometimes incredibly helpful people pop into the YouTube comments and tell me that I'm doing it wrong. And in some ways that's fine. Like, there are definitely a number of different ways of doing it. And I'm sure I appreciate, especially in DaVinci Resolve, the way I did it wasn't necessarily the place to start, but it was just the thing I was interested in exploring. So it's kind of how I felt about that one. But I guess interesting to see if I can actually put this back to where it was. There we go. The really weird thing about this is I'm pretty sure Canva actually purchased Affinity. So they kind of own all of this stuff now, and I'm very thankful that this kind of was, it was an outright purchase for the 3 apps, which are Designer, Photo, and the other one, which I'm already forgetting. Let me just look that up really quickly. So yeah, Photo, Designer, and Publisher. It doesn't really matter how many live streams you've done. Every now and then you'll see something in the comments that just distracts you, and you'll completely lose focus. It's joyful. Anyway, what I guess what I was trying to say was, when I purchased it, and again it was a Black Friday deal, I think it was like 130 odd Australian dollars, and it's for the lifetime of version 2 of the apps. So it wasn't a lot of money. I really like having my own tools that I purchased. I don't love monthly subscriptions, although I have to use them in some cases. So that's definitely something that you can do. Business Growth Ready asks the very interesting question that, is it wrong or is it different? I mean, yeah, in some ways you can do whatever you like. Obviously, at some point, I think it's important to think about laws and copyright and terms and conditions of different platforms. Erica is saying, yes, that's true. Canva did buy it. And it's interesting. I don't love Canva. I know lots of people do. And if that's your jam, please continue to use it. You don't need to defend it. But I'm just an old man that's been using software for 30 odd years, and I'm very used to this kind of interface and working with layers and stuff. And I do have access to templates, but mostly I'm just building my own. So that's the thing. All right. So I love all the chat. It's brilliant. Let's turn this off for a second. So let's think about the things that we might want to incorporate into our live stream. So it could be things like backgrounds. And again, how much of that background you see will probably depend very much on how you're showing up on camera. Because if you have a solid, if you have a real background and you're not removing the background with, the NVIDIA tools or green screens or, chroma keys, blue screens, that sort of thing, you'll definitely see less of it. But that's not really a problem, because you can generally rescale the size of the video frame. So you just need to think about where you're putting that. But I guess, and I didn't really have this planned, so I'm going to have to go digging in my files for this. But one of my best tips that I've ever come across, that I ever, is if you've got a particular layout that you like to use in your streaming software, whether that's just you solo, whether that's you and a guest or you and a co-host, one of the best things you can actually do is just take a screenshot of that layout and then bring that into your graphic software, because then you can sort of design elements around that layout. And again, some software, if we think about a StreamYard or a Restream Studio, often you need to sort of nominate the overlay and the layout as separate items, which I kind of feel like makes it a little clunky, but you can certainly do it. But certainly in things like OBS and Ecamm, you can just literally go to a scene and you'll have all those elements in different places at the right time. So I'm just thinking if I can find one really quickly, and I probably can't, because that's, hey, actually, here we go. So I'm going to, let's go back to the screen share. And again, let's not do this in the OBS one. Let's go back to here. let's think about, in fact, what I might do, let's duplicate the background one. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so I'm going back to my artboard. Let's just duplicate this. I've got all my tools there rather than my layers, which is mildly annoying, but it is what it is. Okay, so let's move this over here, and I'm going to say overlay. If I can type, which I can never do live, which is always joyful. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually bring in a screenshot of the video and live streaming show. This was the tabbed interface that we used to use. We've got me on the left, Sam in the middle, and Michelle J. Raymond, who was the guest of that particular show, on the right. And I must admit, moving the layers has sort of readjusted everything. So I'm just going to bring this out here because it's annoying me now. All right. So if I go to transform, there we go. That's probably what I want. So this is 1920 by 1080. I can go up here to my alignment, and I will just go center, into the artboard, and we're there. So the great thing about this is if you did actually have and let me zoom in a little bit, make it a little bit more obvious. In fact, after moving that there, I think I'll just move this back here and dock it. If I can, if it'll let me, it might not let me. All right, well, joyful. Let's move it onto the side. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's zoom in and let's go up. So the great thing is if you've got this layout from your streaming software, you can think about the things that you want to incorporate here. I should say that this tabbed interface is just depending on how old this was, and I think this probably was just a background image that was actually in StreamYard at that point in time, and I would just update the names and the colors, and I would export 4 of these backgrounds, and I would switch to them after different promos. But essentially, you've got this, so we can actually have things on top of this as well if we wanted to. So it could be a matter of, maybe, because I guess by default, we're seeing a lot of rectangles and a lot of squares in this kind of thing. And you might want to sort of adjust the different shapes that you work around this. Some great comments in the chat. So let's go back to those for a second. Erica writes, I'm using Canva right now. Ever since I found Canva, I haven't used Photoshop. Yeah, I have a lot of feelings about Adobe as a company, and I try very hard to avoid them at all costs these days. But, like I said, whatever works for you, if it's working, unless you really feel compelled to try other things, I would just commit to what you're learning, because you've got that opportunity to learn it more deeply and figure things out, and you'll become really efficient in it over time. So I feel like that's, and I do watch some live streamers that are like, every week there's an exciting new tool on AppSumo, and I just think you shouldn't jump around. That's not a good idea. Okay, Livestream Consultants write, sometimes I will hand sketch a layout on paper first, then try and create it using Canva elements as an overlay with transparent background, as to place the main elements behind it as needed. Absolutely. So that's kind of where we're going with all of this, is that, and again, it probably does depend a little bit on your software, but the great thing about this is we can export image formats that have transparency built into them. So that's typically a PNG file or a GIF. And depending on your software, you can have some of that stuff on top of the other elements. So on top of your video camera, on top of your screen share, whatever it happens to be. And I don't know that I'm really feeling creative enough on a Saturday morning to really design anything of great consequence, but let me just show you conceptually how this might work. So I'm just going to grab one of my tools here, and maybe I've got, I don't know, let's grab one of these shape tools, because again, I like working with shapes. I'm sure Saeed likes working with shapes as well. So I don't know why I would particularly want to star here, but if I did want to star here, I could actually create one. I could give it a fill. It could be a gradient, or it could be a solid shape as well. It might be for the line. I might need to reverse that. I have no idea why it's not actually changing color, but there we go. Let's just try it here, actually. Okay. It does not want to change color, which is very weird. Anyway, let's not dwell on that too much. In fact, what I will do, I will literally just grab a whole bunch of shapes and let's just throw them on there. Like, we don't need to be too precious about this, but the idea is anything that is solid here will block out the things that are underneath it. And again, I probably would take the time to do this in a little bit. And the other thing about this that is kind of genuinely really fun is that, you know, not only can I have a shape in here, but maybe I want to actually, you know, take that out from the background. So if I select both of those and I go up to these options here, I've got things like add and subtract and intersect and XOR or divide. So I'm going to try subtract. We'll find out. Okay, I probably had those in the wrong order. Let me just rearrange that so the star's on top. I didn't do that right. I'm not doing that right. All right, let's just see if we can bring the rectangle down. So let's grab both of those and subtract. And then, you know, once I actually export this, and again, you'll get some sense of this if I toggle this off, although in this case it's a little hard to see because everything is white. So maybe, again, let me try and change the fill color. I don't know, it doesn't seem to particularly like me today. There we go, let's try that, for example. So let's just toggle the visibility, and we can export this in a graphics format such as PNG or GIF, and then, you know, you actually see that part of whatever's underneath it. So you can do that. It's really good. I guess while we're in here, let's just talk about the export options. So if I go to export, the thing about Affinity Designer is it'll kind of automatically come to the overlay. And I guess this is another thing that's worth mentioning. You can design for a particular canvas size. So in this case, you can see that I'm really only adjusting the bottom portion of this area. So potentially I may not need it to fill the entire space, but the great thing about having it fill the entire space is that once I bring it into OBS, it'll sit exactly where I'm expecting it to sit, which is really, really great. But essentially I can choose a format such as PNG or GIF. In fact, mostly I would go PNG. Just make sure that I've got, I guess the other thing too, and I kind of forgot this in the process, is if I go to the document setup, I think I do need to actually tell this somewhere that it should have transparent background. There we go. Okay. And now we can actually see that little sort of grid underneath it to give us that sense of that. So now I can export that, I can rearrange it, and you can see elements that'll be underneath it, which is really, really cool. Let's check in with the comments because there are a few of them. Look, Erica, Erica loves AppSumo. The LTD addiction is real, but I haven't bought anything in a good long while. Now, yeah, I have feelings about that, but that's a whole other show. Livestream Consultants writes, one key feature that most live streamers can use is a custom transition, custom stinger transition. Absolutely. And Saeed, I don't know if this is something you earnestly believe, and I guess it depends a little bit on the context, but he writes, rounded rectangles are the best. So if you're into rounded rectangles, by all means, bring those into your design. I think that's definitely worth exploring. So what we can do is we can go into our streaming software, we can have the background, which sits underneath everything, and depending on how much of the screen it fills or whether you've got background removal tools will depend on how much of the background you can see. But frankly, most people probably aren't tuning in to see your background, so that's neither here nor there. But we can sort of bring in these overlays, and they can be full screen overlays. They can block everything out. And that can be really useful for like a be right back screen, or, you know, just to let people know you're having technical difficulties. And that in itself can be really useful because, you know, maybe you use a different scene for that and you don't have your microphone live while you're swearing at your computer because things aren't working. So you can definitely do that. But it's also fun to work with the transparency where it is supported and sort of bring that in as well. So I feel like this has probably been a little scattered in my presentation this morning because I genuinely could use a lot more sleep today, but I hope you'll bear with me. And what we'll do now, and because I can do this in this particular scene collection, I'm going to just throw to a promo for my podcast, and we'll come back and we'll talk about sort of more video assets in just a moment. Hi, I'm John Lacey, and in Build a Presentation Muscle, I want to talk about finding your voice, refining and sharing your message, using tools and technology to share that message, and looking after yourself as a creator. And if you could see how quickly I scull my coffee during that ad break, it's ridiculous. But that's a promo for my podcast, Build a Presentation Muscle, which you can learn more about at johnlacey.com. And again, for those that might be listening only to this sometime in the future, I press a magical button on my Stream Deck and you'll see a little animation banner pop in with that information and some graphics and some branding. And I kind of want to talk about that as well. I'm not going to put that on the screen, Livestream consultants, but thank you nonetheless. That was very amusing. All right. Let's talk about sort of video assets. And again, all the standard disclaimers apply. If you've got a video editing piece of software you love, please keep using it. I'm going to talk a little bit about DaVinci Resolve because that is the thing that I play with a little bit. And I want to talk about some of the assets I've created previously. Obviously, that banner was an example of one of them. Another one that you've seen on this show is if I press another magical button, I get this like and subscribe text pop up on the screen. But this could be sort of literally anything. And I guess this is the point at which I look at all my projects in DaVinci Resolve and go, which one is the best one to actually show you here? In fact, let's go with one about Sam, and hopefully all these assets are still here. Business Growth Ready does right, say the facilitator. Huey Lewis said rectangle corners are hip to be square. Okay. Nice. All right, so let's head over to DaVinci Resolve. Again, you can use whatever you're using. The thing I like about DaVinci is it's literally free and it's incredibly powerful. I know the powerful part scares some people, and like, you know, the thing I'm going to show you today in here is, this is kind of my favorite part of it, but I know it scares a lot of people. So this is generally the edit screen. So this is where you would just do traditional video editing. And I'll go in here, I'll throw in my clip and I'll cut pieces out and I'll bring things forward and adjust the volume a little bit and go from there. But this Magical Fusion page, it's, again, because I'm an old man in tech, I've used things like Macromedia Flash and Adobe Flash, and there's something about the keyframe approach to this that I actually genuinely find kind of nice, which is really weird. And I appreciate most people don't like working this way. So again, whatever you need to do, you can do. That's totally fine. If I kind of wanted to show you more of that node, there we go. In fact, can I just move this over here? All right. So again, this is kind of the quintessential example where someone random on YouTube came and told me I was doing it wrong. But I just want to talk about what this is. And if I click the play button, again, for those who might only be listening, basically we wait and a bar flashes across the screen, a picture of Sam Proof pops up, and the URL to his website, which is samproof.tv, appears there. There actually is another area on the left where I could put another image in here, but for this particular example, I didn't have one. So again, the reason that I do this in DaVinci is because, like, it's free and I love it, but the great thing, the powerful thing about this is that you can see this checkerboard pattern underneath this lower third. So this animates in, but everything underneath it is potentially transparent depending on the format that you export this to. And I know this is a little abstract, so just bear with me. And I've done an entire video on this. In fact, I've probably done a few videos on this, but the thing about this is that if I go to the deliver page, which is essentially where we render our videos from, I've got this QuickTime format, and the great thing about the QuickTime format is that if you select this export alpha option, it will actually maintain that transparency. I do use a tool called Shutter Encoder, which is free as well, and I export it to a much smaller format just so I can bring it into OBS and press those buttons and do the magical things. But essentially, all that's really happening here is that I've got a whole bunch of different options, and there's literally 1, 2, 3, 4. There are only 4 things that happen here, and one of them isn't even relevant because I didn't use it, but we do have the potential for an image to appear on the left hand side. I'm not using it for this one, but essentially I've got a shape, a rectangle, which I can change the color of. I've got some text, I've got an image, and what I actually ended up doing was that I took this basic animation and I just went in and I changed out the color, I changed out the text, I changed out the images, and then I can re-render it. So again, to give you a sense of this, if I click a button on my Stream Deck now, this will probably cut me off a little bit at the bottom, but that's okay. I get a yellow banner for Cute Avalanche. I get a picture of a cat on the right, and I get Sam's podcast artwork. Again, the other one that we've kind of already seen is the Builder Presentation Muscle version of this, which has sort of a bit of a grey and black gradient. It has an image on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and just johnlacey.com in the middle. So the great thing about all of this is I created this once. I saved this as a template. I kind of know what these images, the size these images need to be, and I do actually do that outside of DaVinci, just because it's easier for me to do that. And I bring that in, and I can just go in, literally just sort of swap out that stuff. It's been a little while since I've actually done anything in Fusion, so I'm not really... So there we go. If I click on that image, for example, if I go to... Let me just see if I can remember how I did this, because it has definitely been a while. I think actually what I can do is so if I go to the media pool, and what I can do is I can click on this, and I think there's an option to actually swap out the clip somewhere, but I don't remember where this is exactly. So replace selected clip. There we go. So I kind of know what these the dimensions of these images. I know what they need to be. So I just size them. I give them the transparent backgrounds in other software. I bring them in and I switch that around. So that's sort of one example. And I might just do this for a second. Business Growth Ready writes, Flash and Shockwave moved the web in terms of animation. Absolutely. And it's kind of, I feel old every time I think about it, but it is kind of wild to reflect on all of that stuff. So what I'm going to do, let's open a recent project. Again, if you've been here a second, you will have seen this one as well, but it is kind of the thing that I think the Livestream consultants mentioned earlier. So many chat comments. Here we go. One key feature that most live streamers can use is a custom stinger transition. Absolutely. So let's talk about that. So let's go back to DaVinci Resolve, and I've kind of got this animation logo stinger. And if you've been here at all in the last 6 months, you've probably seen this and heard me talk about it. And it's funny because I don't really actually have this in any of my scene collections at the moment. But essentially what happens is I press this play button, a version of my logo, and I might even just stop it there. So my logo comes in as, and it's actually an SVG. It's a vector image format, so it can be zoomed in and out really easily. It's not going to pixelate. It's literally the words John Lacey, but it's had a little bit of treatment to it, and it comes in as this white version of the logo. And on the very first frame, it's actually covering the entire frame with that white just because it's so massively zoomed in. And then as we go forward, it sort of gets smaller and smaller so you can actually see what it is. If I go forward a little bit, you'll see that there's a frame, and I think it is literally just a frame, where what was the John Lacey logo with a transparent background is now the John Lacey logo with a black background. And then if we go forward ever so slightly, you'll see that that white background is actually cut out of the black background. And then it sort of zooms out again as well until you don't see anything at all. And again, I've done that in a few different places. And I keep saying this, but I need to bring this into my scene collections because I really love this and it looks amazing. And I have used it in a few videos, but I kind of want to have more access to it. It's just that the problem I guess I have with this is that I don't really have a lot of use for that kind of transition. But I think I'm going to have to invent one because it's just so fun. So let me just see quickly if I can find you an example of this in action, which won't be... So let's just go to recent... I'm going to close the current project. So that'll bring up this magical thing. And I've got so much stuff in here, it's not even funny. But we will find something. So here we go. And we'll go back to our screen share. So this is... All right, I guess this is just a little video where I sort of demonstrated a few of these different things, and I'm hoping that the transition is one of them, but we'll find out in a second. But again, that build a presentation muscle promo flashes across the bottom of the screen. This is me talking in OBS with my solid backgrounds. I'm pretty sure I'm going to press a button to make that logo stinger transition happen somewhere along the line. Really hopeful that that's the case. No, okay, in this case, this is the wrong video that I've selected, so... let me just figure out which one that is. And hello to Walter Strong III, who says, good evening, John, and good evening, everyone. Great to have your company. All right, so I'm just going to see, because again, I'm sure you won't need to go very far to actually see this in action, but I just wanted, I kind of felt like I had a video that I could demonstrate this with, but essentially... and maybe I don't. Maybe we need to just move on from that. Logo stinger CC. Okay. Well, I mean, it is pretty cool. In fact, yeah, and like I said, I've done an entire video on that in the past, so you can definitely check it out. So, Livestream Consultant says that is a unique way to do a stinger transition. Usage could be at the beginning or the end of a video or podcast. Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of the examples, and maybe I can just quickly find one in the backgrounds, but like often I would actually use this sort of moving in and out of sort of photos or video of other things. Okay, cool. I actually have an example for you. So let me just go back to this and I will share this. So this essentially is just a video that I recorded in OBS. And what's happening here is that I've got a photo of a random tree out in nature when I went for a walk. I click the play button. That'll appear on the screen for a while. You'll see the John Lacey logo come in and then you'll see it go out again. And you'll see that transition from the picture of the tree to a picture of me. And that's the thing, at different points during this transition, you will see some transparency. So that single cell in the middle where everything is covered is kind of the transition point in OBS. And again, I won't dwell too much on that because I've done entire shows on how that works in the past. So you can definitely check that in the archives, and I'll probably try and find that link for you and throw it up somewhere. So we've got that there. I guess the other thing, and again, it's just a very simple... I say it's just a simple... It is simple, but it was... I kind of live streamed this at the time when I was just learning DaVinci, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I made lots of mistakes, and we had a good laugh, and it was all good. But essentially, this like and subscribe animation is just another Fusion design, and I'm really curious if I can pull that one up quickly. I'll just see if I can. Like and subscribe. I'm sure it would be called that. La 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 la. Maybe it's not called that. I'm not really sure. Oh, there we go. Actually, I should say the one I'm going to show you isn't actually the version I'm using at the moment. It was something else I was playing with, but I think it's still worth having a look at. So essentially, again, all that's really happening is that we have the words like and subscribe on the screen. I think there are some extra bits in here because I was playing with masking, so things would pop into the screen and pop out again. But essentially, I just have things animate at different points. Again, the transparency is important, and that's kind of the reason I'm exporting to the QuickTime format and then converting to WebM with the shutter encoder. Again, I've done entire live streams on how this works, so I won't dwell on that too much, but I guess we have all these options to create things. And I know some of the people in the audience are probably going to be like, look, this is not my strong suit, and that's fine. Like, you have an opportunity, you could learn this stuff. You could outsource this stuff, or you could just use whatever's available to you within the software, because that's the other thing. You don't necessarily need to recreate the wheel. There probably are defaults in a lot of the software that you're using that you could just run with. But I just think it's fun sometimes to really, go for the branding and try and reinforce that brand so that, when people see it, they recognize you and your work in the things that you've created. And I hear so many people say, oh, video editing is exhausting. I couldn't possibly. And I really like it. I think I like it more than I like being on camera. So I might be a weirdo in that respect, but I think there's all kinds of opportunities to do some cool stuff. I guess the other thing, and I think everyone I've spoken to has suggested that this isn't a new feature, which is probably true, because I certainly trust their judgment on this kind of thing. But something I kind of stumbled across during the week is, obviously, YouTube has its video editor and has for a really, really long time. And I personally, I love DaVinci. I would happily do whatever I want to do in DaVinci for the rest of the time, But I just wanted to note this as well. So if I go into the back end of YouTube Studio, what I can do is I can go into one of my old videos, and these are live streams specifically, and I can go into edit the details. And obviously, this editor's been here for a million years, but a week ago, I had a little banner pop up to notify me of a newish feature, I want to say. But if I go into the editor, I can trim this video and I can make changes. I can blur things out. I can add the end screens. But we also have this option here called Create Video Clip. And I think this part of it might be new. I'm not really sure. Everyone I spoke to had a kind of different opinion on this. But if I click on the Add Video Clip, what happens is we get a transcript from YouTube, and again, it's probably their automated one, so it's probably not exact. You might need to go in and change some of this, but essentially what we can do, if I find a part of this video that I think is interesting, I might click on this word here, and I've got these three options. I can say play from here, set as start, set as end. So I can go set as start. I'm just going to really arbitrarily go to a different word, and I'm going to go set as end. And we'll see now that we've got this clip. In this case, it goes for nearly 7 minutes. It's probably a little bit long for a clip. But once I can play through this, I can listen to this. In fact, if I think that's a good clip, I can actually go up to create draft. And the thing that's really cool about this is it'll create a new draft video with just that segment. So if you want to do it, if there was 2 or 3 minutes in the middle of your stream that you think, that's amazing, I need to share that as its own tip, you could, of course, bring that into whatever you're using, video editing wise, and play with it. And that certainly would give you more options. But the great thing about this is I can make a clip within seconds. And I could give this a title and description, yada, yada, yada. I could add subtitles. I guess the other thing that was kind of interesting to me, even though those automated subtitles exist on the original video, you kind of do need to wait for YouTube to reprocess that. But essentially what we can do, and I'm going to do this one as private, and I will go save. But then you very quickly have this own little standalone clip. And again, it's going to process up to HD. It might take a little bit of time. YouTube might need to check it. But the great thing about this is you can create that clip in seconds. And I know some people don't like creating clips. They don't like the video editing. And I just thought that was kind of neat. I'm curious if any of you have actually played with that before, because I didn't realize it worked in that exact way. Okay, so Livestream Consultants writes, you made a good point about the export and converting to WebM. That part gets missed a lot of times. And that's the thing, I have a seriously souped up computer. Like, it's got all of the things. So I don't have a problem with playing a huge QuickTime video. But I think, from memory, I think those 10-second clips were like 1.5 gigabytes. So it probably wouldn't work on older computers. It probably would be slow and disjointed. And there's something genuinely magical about Shutter Encoder, and it's literally free. You can do everything. I think we did an entire show or part of a show on it in the video and live streaming show. So you can find that in the archives too, but you can convert to a whole bunch of different formats. You can potentially rip videos from other places. Again, be mindful of people's copyright. So you can do that as well. But you can convert it to all kinds of stuff. It's an epic tool. I'm surprised how few people actually know about it. And the more you dig into it, the more exciting features you find. It's really, really epic. And Walter writes, I agree with John on the video editing. I love doing it more than being on camera. Absolutely. And hello to Ernesto, who's saying happy Friday. It's already Saturday here in the future, but I do appreciate the sentiment. And I guess as we begin to wrap up now, I'd probably just encourage you to think about, like, what kind of things would you like to design and incorporate into your live shows? And again, I'm not yelling at you. I'm not telling you you have to do any of these things, but I think if they're of interest to you and you like to explore them, I think it can be really rewarding and it can be fun. Like, this is a great opportunity to have fun. You can create little promo videos. And that's the one thing that I did on the video and live streaming show is I had those promos, and I had 4 of them at one point, and they would literally be between segments 1, 2, 3, 4. And when we were using StreamYard, I would click on the promo, but that was also the opportunity to change the background, which sort of changed which tab we were on in the visuals. So I think working those breaks in is a good idea. Ernesto writes, I forgot you're living in the future. Yes, I really am. And it's Saturday morning, and I'm about to wrap this up and go and drink all of the coffee, which will be delightful. But by all means, play with these different things. I'm not really sure more broadly about the transparency of video in other platforms. Certainly, I used to use Camtasia a lot, but there's no real option to work with transparency there. The workaround, I suppose, is to have a solid color, maybe a green, and then apply a chroma key to that to get rid of the backgrounds. But again, even that's a bit iffy at times. Saeed writes, I find it often easier to create scenes in Sigma than doing it with several sources and filters in OBS. Yeah. And I guess, that's the thing. Unless you're sort of animating something or something's moving, it can be so much easier to just do it in a sort of a 1920 by 1080 frame and just know that everything will be there where you want it to be. But also keep in mind that you could potentially export any element within that as its own thing. And that way you could apply like the move like a movement or an animation or whatever you like in there as well. And Business Growth Ready writes, in the middle of video editing as I watch 9 of 30 videos. Are those just to keep you entertained, or are you learning sort of video editing tips in real time while you're working? It would be interesting to know. All right. Well, I hope this has been interesting and useful. Again, you don't have to do all of the things. I don't want to overwhelm you, but if there is something that you're interested in exploring, go and check that out. Certainly check out the other videos on the Learn Live Streaming channel on YouTube, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be back next week, but I am alternating my shows. So next week we will be talking about OBS Studio in the OBS Obsessed show. I'm not really sure what the topic's going to be just yet. So if you've got any ideas or there are things you'd like to ask about, let me know. But have a great week. Have a great weekend when you get there. And I will talk to you very, very soon.